recent episodes, we've seen that the current brand of so-called science, a brand touted as authoritative truth, is in a state of collapse. Even Sabine Hossenfelder has pointed out that she is nowhere near the only scientist in a state of near panic about the pathetic state of today's science, falsely so called. And it looks as if they're agreeing with what Brian G. Wallace told us a long time ago in The Farce of Physics. There's a deliberate attempt to turn science into an impenetrable fog to keep everybody except the professional scientists in the dark. Wallace pointed out that the major tactic used to create this artificial separation has been the elaborate use of technical jargon and complex mathematics. This erection of high and higher barriers to the comprehension of the scientific affairs is a threat to an essential characteristic of science. And as Thomas Barnes pointed out, this has largely been achieved by the replacement of common sense by mathematics. I came across an example of this a day or two ago when looking through articles to find out about the progress in origin of life research. For many years, people have been assuring us that the solution to the origin of life is at hand. And within 2 years, or 5 years, or whatever, life will be made in the lab. One of the key origin of life scientists is Stuart Kauffman. In an interview with Susan Mazer, he talked about the amazing progress he and his colleagues had been making in this field. It turns out that the light-harvesting molecules in cells show long-lived quantum coherence at ambient temperature. Physicists thought this impossible due to exponentially fast decoherence of a femtosecond. Quantum decoherence is thought to be one of the ways quantum systems become classical, at least for all practical purposes. Decoherence is the loss of what's called phase information to the environment if they're open quantum systems. Gabor has shown mathematically that poised realm has 2 axes, a y-axis going from quantum to classical, going up the y-axis, and then 2 quantum going down the y-axis. Then there's an x-axis, which you get by tuning the Hamiltonians from order and criticality to chaos. Criticality is at the metal-insulator transition for a quantum system. It sounds to me as if this explanation of what origin of life research are doing is little more than hiding the utter worthlessness of their work behind pseudo-scientific mathematical jargon and gobbledygook. I think this is probably the kind of nonsense that makes our heroine Sabina cringe and occasionally descend into frustrated bad language and railing at mathematical fiction. Einstein claimed that any scientist who could not explain his work to a 12-year-old schoolboy is a charlatan. I wonder how many 12-year-olds would understand Kauffman's explanation of his work. But there is a bright side. It makes the work being done by real scientists shine forth for all the world to see. One of the best real scientists today is James Tour. Professor Tour has pointed out that the worst criticism that can be made of anybody connected with science is to be called a creationist. The establishment would like to be rid of James Tour. He's a great embarrassment.
If you do not believe in the physical resurrection of Jesus Christ, send me an email, tour@drjamestour.org, and we will get together, and I will share with you about why I embrace the resurrection of Jesus.
He keeps pointing out that the high-profile, high-priced research into the origin of life is all a sham. But Rice University gets so much money, publicity and status from his research that they can't risk cancelling him. And the reason they make so much money from his research is that it's genuine science. Science using the scientific method. Science based on observation and measurement. Not just on speculation, jargon, and mathematical fiction. But real science leads to real advance and economic value. None of his research is wasted on worthless projects like Origin of Life. His work has led to more than 200 patents and the establishment of 19 companies to exploit those patents. 2 of these companies have been listed on the stock exchange and are making waves on the world scene.
Jim Tour, such a pleasure to have you on American Thought Leaders.
Thank you for having me.
So recently, the Chinese Communist Party basically put unprecedented export controls on rare earths, frankly affecting the whole Western world. There was a deal reached. There seems to be some backtracking since. What were you thinking when you saw this?
Well, it's not just rare earths. It's a number of other metals too. They're now calling them critical metals. So it's copper, it's indium, gallium, tantalum, antimony, and several others. We've turned over manufacturing to them over the last 30 years, and so we have very little capability to manufacture these metals in the U.S. And a lot of times, if they're mined here, they'll go to China for processing. So we don't have the capability to take the ores and to turn them into the base metals that we can use. It's a big problem, and we wouldn't be able to build electric vehicles here. We wouldn't. This would shut down our manufacturing of our automobiles. It's over. This would shut down our Intel plants, our chip manufacturing. So it's a very big deal. And even just the threat of it shakes up the markets.
And now you're working on technology that's directly related to this issue.
Yes.
Yeah, so explain that to me.
We developed a technology in my group called flash Joule heating. And it's not a name that we coined, that's been around, where you put a high voltage and a high current through a material, gets red hot very quickly. That's flash Joule heating. And it's like the old incandescent light bulbs, and you see this big glow. And what we learned is that we can put any carbon material between electrodes and flash Joule heat it, turn it into graphene. Graphene is this space-age material, and we started a company around that. That's up and going. But then we realized that we could take certain materials, say industrial waste, like fly ash, which is the residue that's left over after burning coal, the inorganic material. We could flash it, and we could get rare earth elements to come out. And so we could do that. We could get other metals from industrial waste, and then also consumer waste, consumer electronics, and you can put a high voltage, high current. And then we learned if you put chlorine in during the process, then they come out much more easily because you convert them from metal zero or metal oxides to metal chlorides, which are much more volatile. You lower the boiling point by 3,000 degrees, and then they'll come out. And just based on the reactivity of a certain metal to chlorine at these higher temperatures, we can predict when they're going to come out, and we can separate them coming out. So we developed this technology. We started doing this in 2020. We started doing this on metals. And then it was after that the metals, that China put this kibosh on sending us metals, and it became much more important. So I found myself in this very important area.
Okay, so let me get this straight. you're taking electronic waste or tailings or something like this. You're putting them between two plates. You're putting a massive amount of current through it. You're adding chlorine to lower the temperature that you to get them this red hot, to separate everything out. And then you're somehow collecting each metal chloride as it basically distills out. Do I understand it right?
You have it right. So what happens is when the chlorine comes in at these high temperatures, the chlorine will react with the metal oxides or the metal zero. By metal zero, I mean the base metal. You can have a metal oxide or a base metal. And it will make the metal chloride. And then the metal chlorides distill out. And the thing we control is at what temperature are we heating this to react with the chlorine, and then at what temperature are we distilling it out. And based on those two parameters, we can pull out one metal, and then the next, and the next, and the next.
James Tour has featured in some of our episodes, particularly in 97 and 60. One or two of our regulars were unhappy that Tour claimed that origin of life research comes nowhere near explaining how life could have come about naturally, but stopped short of saying it never would be able to do so. An Italian-speaking Swiss engineer, Ortangelo Grasso, who designs machinery, became very interested in the machinery of the cell. He realized that its astounding design and mind-boggling complexity far exceeds the capabilities of today's most advanced engineering. He spent 10 years of study of biological systems and wrote a 3-volume analysis of what he found. He recognized James Tour as one of the world's top experts on organic chemistry and sent him a copy for criticism and review.
I mean, my aim from the beginning was, let me try to get a whole picture, a holistic or a systems picture of what is required to have first life to start. And usually what we see is the down-up approach, which is about the prebiotic world and how the basic building blocks could have been synthesized by natural means. But then you have the up-down approach, where you start with the minimal cell and then try to understand how it could have emerged from a simpler system. But then you have a deep gap in between, and it cannot be breached because there are so many systems which need to be and operate in an interdependent manner. We are talking here not only about the proteins and the biosynthesis pathways and metabolic and catabolic pathways which work like production lines in an integrated fashion together. We are also talking about the signaling and coding and the languages, and there is not just the genetic language. There are several epigenetic languages which are also required in order for life to start. And they also operate and work in a joint venture in a synergistic manner together. So it is really a unit which you need from the beginning, which makes the concept of interdependence or irreducible complexity very pertinent and very clear. And this is something which simply refutes naturalistic explanations. First life had to be created from the get-go, fully operational and in populations, and that is what the evidence points to. And each cell had to have a homeostatic situation where the calcium signaling, for example, the concentration inside the cell has to be 10,000 times less concentrated than in the exterior in order for you to have signaling inside the cell. And if you don't have calcium signaling, no deal. So how do you get this homeostasis situation where you require several different proteins from the beginning which cooperate in order to instantiate this homeostatic situation And as I expose in my book, we are not talking about calcium signaling. There are many different other things which, like pH level and so forth, which also need to be in a homeostatic situation from the get-go. And you cannot get to that with the gradualistic scenario. It doesn't work. You need the cell membrane and the membrane proteins which instantiate this homeostasis from the get-go. So I say this, if someone really studies abiogenesis and all these problems, the picture becomes very clear. What Dr. Tour, what you have said over the years, it becomes crystal clear. And actually, you are saying that I am being too nice. And I would say after my investigation, which is close to 2,000 open problems, you have also been too nice to show the size of the problem to get life starting.
I will agree with you on that. I will agree with you. After reading your book, I came with a new appreciation for the magnitude of the problem. I knew it was hard, but as you mentioned it, we just recently published a paper in Nature Chemistry on calcium signaling, where we used our little nanomachines to modify the calcium signaling that went on in our little light-operated nanomachines. I mean, calcium signaling is huge and hugely important. You can't operate a cell without this. And how do you do this? And so what Otangelo is saying is you can't have it piecemeal. You can't have this was made and then this was made and then this was made and then this was made. You have to have all of these in the same place, operating, assembled into pieces, operating. You can't have one part without the other. To have a working cell, there's so many pieces that have gotten together. I'm telling you, you could bet all your money on the fact that these origin of life researchers will never make life. They'll never make life in their lifetimes. It'll never happen in their student lifetimes or their students' lifetimes. We are so far from this. And this is why Otangelo is saying that there must have been something behind this, because a naturalistic model just doesn't allow it. And this is why I have said many, many times, I said, when I look at the chemistry, it screams out, life could not have happened this way, the way that you are saying. That it's not just that it doesn't support what you're saying. It screams out the opposite of what you're saying. It says it didn't happen that way. It didn't happen. And I accept exactly what you're saying, Otangelo. I have been too nice.
If he is not convinced that they never will crack the origin of life without the input of a super intelligent creator, I very much doubt he would advise betting everything you have that they won't. Well, this is the last episode for 2025. I hope you have a joy-filled, blessed Christmas. A big thank you to all who took part in the discussions this year. And a special thank you for those who contributed by Patreon. I really do appreciate your support. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Thank you for joining me for this episode. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and press the bell so that you'll be notified as I release new movies. If you'd like to support this project, you're welcome to do so through Patreon. Find a link on my channel banner and in the description below.